You probably don't have trouble spending hours on your phone playing video games or browsing social media. In fact, I'm sure you could sit in front of a screen for 2 hours or even longer without losing focus. But what about studying for half an hour? That might feel difficult. How about working on your side business for another hour? That doesn't sound too appealing. Even though you know that activities like studying, exercising, and building your business will benefit you in the long run, you still find yourself gravitating toward TV, video games, and social media. This makes sense because one activity is easy and doesn't require much effort, while the other is challenging and demands your attention. However, some people seem to have no problem consistently studying, exercising, or working on their side projects. This raises the question, why are some people more motivated to tackle difficult tasks, and is there a way to make doing hard things easier? To answer that, we need to understand the role of a neurotransmitter in the brain called dopamine. Dopamine is often referred to as the pleasure molecule, but that's not exactly what it does. Dopamine is actually what drives our desire for things, and it's that desire that gives us the motivation to take action. If you're unsure how powerful dopamine is, let me share an example from some experiments conducted on rats. Researchers implanted electrodes into the brains of rats. Whenever the rats pulled a lever, the researchers would stimulate the rat's reward system. The result was that the rats became so obsessed with pulling the lever that they did it over and over for hours. They would even refuse to eat or sleep, continuing to press the lever until they collapsed from exhaustion. Later, the researchers reversed the process by blocking dopamine release. As a result, the rats became so lethargic that they wouldn't even get up to drink water. They lost all desire to do anything, including eating or mating. In fact, they didn't crave anything at all. You could say they had lost all will to live. However, if food was placed directly in their mouths, they would eat and enjoy it. This shows that while hunger and thirst are natural motivators, dopamine plays a key role in creating desire and motivation for action. While these rat experiments are extreme, similar effects are observed in humans. In fact, your brain sets priorities based on how much dopamine it expects to get from various activities. If an activity releases very little dopamine, you won't feel motivated to do it. On the other hand, if an activity releases a lot of dopamine, your brain will be motivated to repeat it. So what kinds of activities release dopamine? Any activity where there is an anticipation of reward. For instance, before you eat your favorite comfort food, your brain releases dopamine because you anticipate feeling good. Even though you may feel worse afterward, your brain doesn't care about the consequences. It's just after more of that rewarding feeling. A typical example would be someone who's addicted to drugs. They know the drug is harmful, but all they crave is the dopamine rush it gives them. Drugs like cocaine and heroin trigger an overwhelming release of dopamine, which makes the person crave the high even more. Of course, nearly everything releases some dopamine. Drinking water when you're thirsty, for example, causes a small dopamine release. But the highest release happens when you receive rewards unpredictably. A good example is playing a slot machine in a casino. You might have been losing for a while, but you're still hopeful for a bigger win. You don't know when it's coming, but you keep playing. In today's digital world, we're constantly bombarded with high dopamine stimuli, often without even realizing it. Social media, video games, and internet pornography are examples of high dopamine behaviors. With each scroll or click, we expect some kind of reward, a new notification, a like, or something exciting. This constant need for a dopamine hit is similar to the rats pulling the lever. We are essentially becoming addicted to the search for more dopamine. You might think, so what? It's not like these activities are causing any real harm. However, you would be wrong. Our bodies have a system called homeostasis, which strives to keep things in balance. When we encounter an imbalance, our body adapts. For example, when it's cold, our bodies shiver to generate heat. When it's hot, we sweat to cool down. But homeostasis isn't limited to just regulating temperature. It also applies to dopamine levels. When your brain is constantly exposed to high levels of dopamine, it adapts by down-regulating dopamine receptors. This means that your brain becomes less sensitive to dopamine, requiring more of it to get the same effect. Essentially, you develop a dopamine tolerance. As a result, activities that once felt enjoyable, like working or studying, no longer provide enough dopamine to feel motivating. They may seem boring or unappealing compared to the high dopamine activities like video games or social media. This is one reason why people struggling with addiction addiction, whether to drugs, video games, or pornography, have a difficult time adjusting to normal life. Their brains have become so used to high dopamine levels that everyday activities no longer feel rewarding. So what can be done to fix this? The answer is a dopamine detox. You may already have an idea of what this entails. For one day, you cut off all high dopamine activities. You refrain from using technology like your phone or computer. Avoid listening to music, watching TV, eating junk food, or engaging in anything that gives you instant gratification. The goal is to allow your dopamine receptors to recover and reset. Disclaimer: if you are struggling with a drug addiction, it's best to seek professional help, as withdrawal symptoms can be severe. But if you're just looking to reset your brain from other high dopamine behaviors, a detox can be effective. During a dopamine detox, you'll be embracing boredom. You can walk outside, meditate, reflect on your life and goals, or write down your thoughts on paper. The boredom might feel intense at first, but trust me, it will have a significant impact. By cutting off sources of external pleasure, your brain will be more receptive to lower dopamine activities, making them feel more enjoyable. If the idea of an intense detox sounds too extreme, you can start with a smaller version. For example, pick one day each week where you completely avoid one of your high dopamine behaviors. Whether it's checking your phone, playing video games, or watching TV, avoid it entirely for the day. While this might feel boring, that's the point. It helps reset your brain. The boredom pushes you to engage in other activities that you might typically put off because they don't release as much dopamine. Ultimately, your goal should be to connect more dopamine to the activities that benefit you in the long term. One strategy is to use your high dopamine activities as rewards for completing productive tasks. For example, I track the difficult low dopamine work I do, such as cleaning, reading, practicing the piano, or exercising. After completing a certain amount of work, I reward myself with some high dopamine activity at the end of the day. The key is to always start with the difficult tasks, not the rewarding ones. If I indulge in high dopamine behavior first, I won't feel motivated to tackle the tough stuff. For every hour of low dopamine work, I reward myself with 15 minutes of high dopamine activity. This ratio can be adjusted based on your preferences. However, if you're addicted to something that harms your health, find a healthier alternative as a reward. To conclude, it is possible to make difficult tasks feel easier. However, when your brain is flooded with constant dopamine hits, it's hard to find motivation for tasks that don't release as much dopamine. This is why reducing phone and computer usage, along with other high dopamine behaviors, can be incredibly beneficial. It's worth the effort, and if you're struggling with motivation, starting a dopamine detox can help reset your brain. We all experience dopamine addiction to some extent, but it's up to you to decide where to get your dopamine from. Will you get it from activities that don't benefit you, or from working on your long-term goals? The choice is yours.